I want to tell you something my sister never told anyone. The night Marcus Holt whispered 4 words in a parking garage in downtown Houston, my sister Camille had a rule. She had carried that rule for 3 years like a shield. She wore it every morning with her stethoscope. She repeated it every time his name came up at Mama's dinner table. She had written it down once, actually put in her phone like a note to herself. No Marcus. Not ever again. I was 20 feet away that night, sitting in my car in the dark, engine off, watching through the windshield because I had followed her. I know how that sounds. But when your big sister starts checking her phone every 5 minutes and flinching at the mention of a man she swore she was done with, you follow her. I watched him walk toward her. I watched her stand there like she was trying to decide something. And then he leaned in and said something I could not hear. And Camille forgot every single word of that rule she made. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you emotional stories that stay with you. If you're new here, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a story. And if you're returning, thank you. Your support means everything. Now, stay until the end, drop a comment with your thoughts, and let's begin. My sister Camille became a different person the summer our daddy got sick. Not a bad person, just harder, quieter, like something inside her tightened up, and she forgot to let it back out after he got better. She was 32 then, just made attending physician at Memorial Hermann, working 12-hour shifts in the emergency room, coming home to her condo in the medical center with her scrubs still smelling like antiseptic. She did not complain. Camille never complained. She just moved through everything fast, like if she stopped moving she might feel how tired she really was. Marcus came into her life that same summer. Mama told me about him first, which tells you something right there. Because Camille did not bring men home, and she did not talk about them. But Mama said she saw something shift in Camille at Sunday dinner one evening. A lightness, the way she tilted her head when her phone buzzed, the way she smiled down at the screen, and then looked up quick like she caught herself. Mama said, "That girl is seeing somebody." I said, "How do you know?" She pointed at the collard greens. She ate 2 helpings. Camille hasn't eaten 2 helpings of anything since medical school. That was Mama, always watching, always reading the room from the kitchen while she stood over a pot of her oxtail stew with Anita Baker playing low on the old speaker on the counter. I did not meet Marcus for 4 months. Camille kept him separate. I only knew he was white, owned some kind of tech company, and had grown up in Dallas before moving to Houston. I knew she met him at the hospital, not as a patient, but in the lobby during a charity gala the hospital held every fall. I knew that because she let it slip once and then changed the subject so fast I almost missed it. What I knew for certain was that when Camille was with him, or even thinking about him, she laughed differently, deeper, slower, not the polite laugh she gave people at work or the tight smile she kept for situations she was managing. A real laugh, from somewhere low, the kind our grandmother used to pull out of her when she was a little girl and thought nobody was watching. I was happy for her. I want to make sure I say that, because what happened later can make it easy to forget that part. I was so happy for her. Then the fall turned cold, and she stopped laughing like that. She did not tell me what happened at first. Mama didn't know either. One Sunday, she just showed up to dinner without the lightness, sat in her usual chair across from me, helped herself to one serving of everything, ate quietly, answered questions in short sentences. After dinner, she helped wash dishes, and then said she had an early shift and left. She was gone before I could even put on my coat. I texted her that night. She replied 2 days later. Just, "I'm good. Busy at the hospital." I knew my sister. She was not good. I drove to her condo the following Saturday morning with 2 coffees from a breakfast club and a box of beignets from a place she liked over in 3rd Ward. She opened the door in sweats, hair wrapped, and I could tell she had been awake for hours because her eyes had that dry, too awake look people get when they've been lying in the dark, not sleeping. She let me in. We sat on her couch. I handed her the coffee and waited. Camille held the cup in both hands for a long time without drinking it. Then she said, "We're not doing this." I said, "Doing what?" "Whatever this is." "You brought beignet. Renee, you only bring beignet when you want something from me. She was not wrong. I said, I want to know you're okay. She looked at me. Her eyes were steady. Camille had the most steady eyes of any person I knew. She could be falling apart on the inside, and her eyes would just look calm and clear, like water that was deep enough you could not see the bottom. She said, I ended things with Marcus. I waited. She said, it was the right decision. I said, okay. She said, stop looking at me like that. I said, like what? She stood up and took her coffee to the kitchen and started doing something at the counter that did not need to be done, moving things around, wiping a surface that was already clean. I said, Camille. She stopped moving. I said, you don't have to tell me everything, but you don't have to perform fine for me either. I'm your sister. She stood there with her back to me for what felt like a full minute. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, somebody on the street below honked once, and then it was quiet again. Then she turned around and I saw it. Just for a second. The thing under the steadiness. She said, he wanted more than I could give him right now. And I made a decision that my career and daddy's situation, and just everything, it's too much. I can't split myself into that many pieces. I nodded. She said, it was logical. I said, okay. She said, it was the right call. I said, okay, Camille. She looked at me. Stop saying okay like that. I said, like what? She almost smiled. Almost. She picked up her coffee, came back to the couch, and we sat there for another hour talking about other things. Mama's blood pressure medication, my job at the hospital billing office, the new pastor at New Hope Baptist, whom Mama was not yet sure about. We talked about everything except Marcus Holt. Before I left, she walked me to the door and hugged me, which Camille did not always do, and held on a second longer than usual. I drove home with the empty beignet box on the passenger seat, and I thought about what she said. Logical. Right call. I had never once in my life heard Camille use the word logical to describe something she actually felt good about. That was the beginning of the rule. Over the next few months, she billed it the way she billed everything. Quietly. Systematically. She took extra shifts. She rearranged her condo, moved furniture, bought a new bookshelf she filled with medical journals. She started going to New Hope on Sundays again, sitting 3 pews behind Mama and singing hymns in that low voice she had. She made her mother's oxtail stew from scratch one Sunday and brought it to Mama's house in a pot, and all 6 of us, me and Mama and our Aunt Teresa and 2 cousins, ate until we couldn't move. She seemed okay. She really did. But I noticed she stopped going to anything at the hospital that wasn't required. No galas, no foundation dinners, nothing optional. And once, when I was visiting her at work, and we passed through the main lobby, and she saw something across the room that made her stop walking mid-sentence, I turned to look and saw nothing except a white man in a dark suit with his back to us near the elevator bank. She picked her sentence back up immediately, never paused again. I did not say anything. The rule. That was what it became in my head. Camille's rule. No Marcus. Not ever again. And she held it together so well, for so long, that I started to believe she was actually okay. 3 years. That rule held for 3 years. Then one Tuesday evening my phone rang, and it was Mama, and Mama said in the careful voice she used when she was worried but trying not to show it, Renee, have you talked to your sister today? I said no. Mama said, she called me this afternoon. Sounded off. Said she had a situation at work she needed to sort out, but she'd come to dinner Sunday. I said, what kind of situation? Mama paused. Then she said the name. Marcus Holt. Apparently, he had joined the hospital's board of directors. Some major donation. His name had been in the Houston Chronicle and everything. And now, whether Camille liked it or not, he was going to be present at events she could not skip. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, she'll be fine, Mama. You know Camille. Mama said, That sound Mama made was not agreement. Any person who grew up in that house knew what that meant. It meant I hear you, but I don't believe you, and I'm going to be watching. I hung up, and I sat in my car in the parking lot of the hospital billing office where I worked, and I stared at my steering wheel. 3 years of no Marcus. And now Marcus was on the board. What I did not know yet, what I couldn't have known sitting in that parking lot, was that in 4 weeks I would be sitting in a different parking garage in the dark, watching my sister's hand shake. And it would have nothing to do with her rule breaking. It would have everything to do with what he said when she forgot it. The first time Camille saw Marcus Holt at the hospital after 3 years, she came home and reorganized her entire kitchen. I only know this because she called me at 10:45 at night, and I could hear cabinet doors opening and closing in the background. I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Reorganizing." I said, "At 10:45? She said, "The spice rack has been bothering me for months." I let that sit there. She said, "He was in the administrative hallway today, walking with Dr. Okafor and 2 people from the foundation. He had a visitor badge." I said, "Did he see you?" A cabinet closed. Then another one. She said, "Yes." I waited. She said, "He nodded." I nodded back. That was it. Very professional. Very normal. It was completely fine. I said, "Okay." She said, "Renee, I swear if you say okay in that voice one more time." I said, "What did his nod look like?" Silence. A drawer opened and closed. She said, "What kind of question is that?" I said, "Just answer it." Another long pause. She said, "Slow." It was a slow nod, like he was being careful. Then she said, "Quickly," which means nothing. People nod. It was a nod, Renee. I have to finish the spice rack. She hung up. I put my phone down and stared at the ceiling and thought about the fact that my sister, who had not reorganized a single thing in her immaculate condo in 3 years, had just spent her Tuesday night alphabetizing paprika. That was the first week. The second week was worse, though it did not look like worse from the outside. From the outside, everything looked controlled. Camille showed up to Sunday dinner and ate her one serving and talked about a complicated case she had in the ER, a 40-year-old man who came in convinced he was fine and turned out to be anything but. She talked about it the way she always talked about her cases, with precision and focus, pulling out each detail like she was presenting at a conference. Mama listened and nodded, and our Aunt Teresa said, "Lord have mercy," at the right moments. Nobody mentioned Marcus. After dinner, I helped Mama in the kitchen, and Camille sat at the table with our cousin Deja, who was 22 and in nursing school, and worshiped Camille the way young women worship the person they want to become. Deja was asking her something about residency applications, and Camille was answering fully, giving her everything, the kind of attention she gave people she cared about. I watched her from the kitchen doorway. She looked like herself, sounded like herself. But when Mama turned the speaker on, and Bill Withers came through low and warm and Deja laughed at something, and the room felt easy and full the way it did on good Sunday evenings, I saw Camille's eyes go somewhere else for just a second. Not long. Maybe 3 seconds. She looked toward the window that faced the backyard where the old oak tree was, the one Daddy planted before we were born. Then she came back, smiled at something Deja said, kept going. 3 seconds. That was all. But I knew my sister. 3 seconds was a lot. The third week was when I started actually paying attention. I work in the billing office on the 4th floor of the main hospital building. My office has a window that looks down onto the main entrance courtyard. It is not something I usually pay attention to. There are people coming and going all day, and after a while it becomes background, like traffic noise. But that Wednesday morning I looked up from my screen and saw Camille crossing the courtyard below, still in her white coat, moving fast the way she always moved, coffee cup in one hand, phone in the other. She was heading toward the parking structure on the east side, which meant her shift had just ended. And then I saw Marcus Holt come through the main entrance doors behind her. He was not following her. He was just arriving, the way board members arrived, in a dark coat, moving with the kind of unhurried certainty that men with that much money move with. He was talking to someone beside him, not looking in her direction, but I watched, because the courtyard was not large. And Camille was walking, and Marcus was walking, and the geometry of it meant that if neither of them changed direction, they were going to pass within about 10 feet of each other. Camille looked up. She saw him at the same moment. He stopped talking to the person beside him. From 4 floors up, and through glass I could not read faces. I could only read bodies. And what I saw was this. Camille's pace did not change. She did not slow down, but her coffee cup moved from one hand to both hands, and she gripped it the way you grip something when you need something to hold. Marcus said something to the person beside him, and the person kept walking toward the entrance. Marcus stopped walking. Camille passed him. He turned and watched her go. She did not look back. She disappeared into the parking structure, and he stood there for maybe 4 seconds and then turned and went inside. I sat at my desk with my hands in my lap. I thought about something Camille said to me once, years before Marcus, back when we were younger and she was still in medical school, and we were having one of those late-night kitchen conversations that only happen when the rest of the house is asleep. She said the thing about being strong all the time was not that it was hard. She said the hard part was that eventually you got so good at it that you stopped being able to tell the difference between choosing strength and just being afraid. I thought about that a lot in the days that followed. The 4th week was when Mama called me again. She called on a Thursday morning, which was unusual because Mama called on Sundays and sometimes Wednesdays, but almost never Thursdays. I picked up and heard the Anita Baker record in the background, which Mama only played on Thursdays when something was on her mind, and she opened with small talk for exactly 2 minutes before she said what she actually called to say. She said, "Marcus Holt's company is sponsoring the hospital gala next month." I said, "Mama," she said, "the whole thing, they're calling it something about innovation in healthcare. It's going to be in the Chronicle again." I said, "Mama, Camille is going to be fine." She said, "She called me last night." I said, "What did she say?" Mama was quiet for a moment. I heard her move through the kitchen. The familiar sound of her slippers on the tile floor, the creak of the cabinet where she kept her good mugs. She said she was thinking about requesting a schedule change so she wouldn't have to attend the gala. I said, "She's allowed to do that." Mama said, "Renee, that gala is where they honor the ER physicians this year. Her name is on the program. Dr. Okafor personally asked her to be there. The gala, the one event she absolutely could not skip." I said, "She'll go. You know she will. Camille doesn't back down from things." Mama said, "No, she doesn't." Then Mama said, slowly, the way she said things she had been thinking about for a while before she said them out loud, "But she does protect herself, sometimes even from things that aren't trying to hurt her." I did not have an answer for that. After I hung up, I sat at my desk and looked out the window at the courtyard below. It was empty, just a fountain running, and a few pigeons on the edge of the railing, and the Houston morning, doing what Houston mornings did in the fall, warm and gray and thick. I thought about Camille requesting a schedule change. Camille, who had never once in her career avoided a professional obligation. Camille, who showed up to a conference 3 days after we buried our grandmother because she had already committed to presenting a paper, and she said Grandma would have been the first one to tell her to go. That was the moment I decided I was going to start watching more carefully. Not because I thought Camille couldn't handle it. My sister could handle anything. She had proved that her whole life. But because I had seen what she looked like when she handled things at the cost of herself. And I was not going to sit in a billing office 4 floors up and watch that happen again from behind glass. The gala was 3 weeks away. I started paying attention. If you're feeling this story, hype it so others can find it. Comment where you're watching from. Now back to the story. I was not supposed to be at that gala. I want to be clear about that. I work in billing. I process insurance claims and chase down codes and spend most of my days on the phone with people who do not want to talk to me. I do not get invited to hospital galas. Those are for physicians and donors and board members and people whose names are on buildings. But my friend Angie worked in the events office and owed me a favor from the time I helped her untangle a billing nightmare that would have cost the department a very uncomfortable conversation with the CFO. She got me in as part of the volunteer check-in team. White button down, black pants, clipboard, earpiece that was not connected to anything. I looked official enough. Camille did not know I was going to be there. I told myself I was just being a good sister, that I wanted to be nearby in case she needed someone, that it was not surveillance. It was support. I almost believed that. The gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Marriott Marquis downtown, which the hospital used every year, because it had the right combination of space and prestige, and a catering team that knew how to feed 500 people without making it feel like a cafeteria. By 7 o'clock, the room was full. Round tables with white linens and low floor arrangements, the kind that didn't block faces across the table. String lights along the ceiling. A jazz quartet in the corner playing something slow and warm that nobody was really listening to, but that made everything feel more significant than it was. I stood near the check-in table by the entrance for the first hour and watched people arrive. Hospital administrators in their best suits. Donors who looked like donors, confident and slightly bored. Physicians who cleaned up well and seemed faintly uncomfortable out of their white coats. Spouses who had heard too many hospital stories to be impressed by the setting. Camille arrived at 7:20. She wore a deep burgundy dress, fitted, long, with her hair up in a way I recognized because it was the same way she wore for every formal occasion that required her to be taken seriously. Clean, elegant, no nonsense. She came in alone, checked in with the actual check-in staff, and moved into the room with that pace of hers, the one that said she knew exactly where she was going even when she was still figuring it out. She did not see me. I watched her greet Dr. Okafor near the bar, shake hands with two people I did not recognize, accept a glass of water from a passing server. She was good at this, the professional social thing. She could work a room with the same precision she worked a trauma bay. Focused, warm when warmth was required, economical with everything else. She looked beautiful and completely armored, and I felt an ache in my chest watching her, because I knew the difference. Marcus arrived at 7:40. I knew it before I saw him, because I saw Camille see him. I was watching her from across the room, and I saw it happen the way you see weather change. Something in her shoulders, something in the angle of her chin. She was mid-conversation with a woman from the foundation board, and she did not stop the conversation, did not change her expression, but something in her went still and deliberate the way things go still when a person is actively deciding how to be. He came in with two other men and a woman, all of them in that easy way that people moved when they were used to entering rooms and having the rooms respond. He was in a dark suit, no tie, the kind of effortless that took money to achieve. His hair was shorter than I remember from the one time I had seen him, years ago, when Camille brought him to Daddy's birthday dinner, and he sat at our family table and talked to my father about woodworking for 45 minutes like it was the most interesting conversation he had ever had. I had liked him then. I want to say that, too. I had liked Marcus Holt the one time I met him, and the liking had made the aftermath harder to witness. He was escorted to a table near the front. Camille's table was 3 rows back, which was close enough to be uncomfortable and far enough to be manageable. I watched her calculate this from across the room. I watched her file it away and keep talking to the foundation woman, and reach for her water glass with a hand that was completely steady. Dinner was served at 8. I found a position near the side wall where I could see both tables without being obvious about it. The roommate and the jazz quartet played, and the speeches started at 8:45. Dr. Okafor spoke first, then the hospital CEO, then someone from the foundation. Marcus was introduced as the evening's principal sponsor, and he stood briefly and said something short and genuine sounding about healthcare access that got real applause, not polite applause, which told me he knew how to read a room. Camille clapped with everyone else. Her face gave away nothing. The physician honors came after 9. They called Camille's name for the ER Excellence Award, and she walked to front and received the plaque from Dr. Okafor and said something brief and composed about her team, about the nurses and residents who did the real work, about the patients who trusted them on the worst days of their lives. She did not look toward Marcus's table while she spoke, but when she walked back to her seat, the path took her within 2 tables of him. He watched her walk past. She did not look at him. She sat down and put the plaque beside her plate and picked up her water glass, and I saw her take one slow breath before she rejoined her table's conversation. 2 tables away, Marcus Holt looked at his own hands for a moment and then back at the room. After 10, the tables began to open up. People moved around, groups formed and dissolved. The bar got more popular and the music got slightly louder. I shifted position and kept watching. Camille was doing her final rounds, the kind of graceful exit strategy where you say your goodbyes in the right order so nobody feels skipped. She was good at this too. She had her coat over her arm. She was maybe 15 minutes from being out the door. Then someone stopped her, a physician I did not recognize. Older man, hand extended, the kind of stop that meant she was going to be there for at least 5 more minutes of conversation she did not want. I watched her settle into it, coat still over her arm, patient smile. Across the room, Marcus finished a conversation of his own, shook hands, and began moving toward the exit. He was going to pass her. I do not think he planned it. The room had reorganized itself over the course of the evening, and the natural path to the exit from where he was standing went directly past the cluster of people where Camille was standing with the older physician. He could have gone around. He did not go around. He passed close enough that Camille heard him coming before she saw him, because I watched her register something half a second before she turned that specific stillness again, and then he was there. He stopped. She turned fully. They looked at each other for the first time all evening, close enough now that there was no nodding from a distance, no managed geometry of a courtyard. Just two people standing inside the same few feet of air in a room full of people. The older physician was still talking. Neither of them heard him. Marcus said something to her quietly. I could not hear it. The music was too loud, and I was too far away. But I watched her face. I watched the armor hold for exactly 3 seconds. Then something in it shifted. Not broke, not collapsed, just moved, like a door that has been sealed a long time, and someone puts the right amount of pressure in exactly the right place. She said something back. Short, 1 sentence, maybe 2. He nodded. That slow, careful nod I had heard about on the night of the spice rack. And then he said something else. Leaned in slightly because the music had picked up and the room was louder now. Close enough that what he said was only for her. And Camille went still. Completely still. The kind of still that is not calm, but is the thing that happens before calm becomes impossible. She said something. 1 word. I could not tell what it was. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he straightened up, said something brief to the older physician who was still standing there and now looking confused, and walked toward the exit. Camille stood in the middle of the ballroom with her coat over her arm and her plaque in her hand, and people moving around her, and I watched her chest rise and fall once, slowly. Then she said something to the older physician, shook his hand, and walked out. I waited 60 seconds and followed her. I did not know where she was going. I thought she was heading to the valet, to her car, to home. But she did not go toward the valet line. She went toward the hotel parking garage, the self-park structure on the north side of the building, which meant she had driven herself and parked herself the way she always did, because Camille did not do valet. I followed at a distance. The garage was quieter than the ballroom, concrete and fluorescent light, and the sound of the city outside. My heels were too loud on the floor, and I slowed down, stayed back, watched her move through the structure toward the elevator bank. Then I saw Marcus. He was already there, waiting at the elevator bank, jacket still on, hands in his pockets, like he had left 2 minutes before her, and came here directly, like he knew she would come this way. Camille stopped walking. He turned around. They looked at each other across 20 feet of empty concrete and fluorescent light, and I pressed myself back against the support column and held my breath. He walked toward her. She did not move. He stopped when he was close enough to speak, without raising his voice. I was too far to hear, but I could see everything. His hands came out of his pockets. He did not reach for her. He just let them hang at his sides, open, which for some reason was worse than if he had reached for her, because it looked like surrender. He said something. She shook her head. He said something else. Longer this time. His face was serious, but not desperate. The face of a man who had thought about this moment for a long time and was saying what he came to say. She looked at him. Then she looked down at her coat and her arms. Then back at him. And then he said it. I could not hear the words. But I watched his mouth, and I have played it back in my mind enough times that I am certain I am reading it right. For words. You belong to me. Camille's chin dropped slightly. Her coat slipped a little in her arms, and she caught it automatically, The reflex of someone whose hands were suddenly not entirely under their own management. She stood there looking at him. And then the thing I had been watching for all night, the thing under the armor, the thing she had been protecting and managing and holding down for 3 years, came all the way to the surface. Not loud, not dramatic. This was Camille. There were no tears, no gasping. Just her face, finally, without the steadiness in front of it. Just her actual face looking at this man, in a parking garage under fluorescent light. She said something. He waited. She said something else. And whatever she said in that parking garage after 3 years of no Marcus, not ever again, he exhaled like a man who had been holding his breath for a very long time. He reached up and touched her face, just his hand on her cheek. One hand. She turned into it slightly, the way a person turns toward warmth without deciding to. I looked away. I stared at the concrete wall of the parking garage and listened to the city outside and gave my sister the moment I had just witnessed, the way you give someone something that was never yours to take. After a while, I heard the elevator open and close. I waited 5 more minutes and then walked to my own car on level 2 and sat in it with my hands on the steering wheel and the engine off. I did not start the car for a long time. I thought about the rule. 3 years of it. The spice rack and the extra shifts and the Sunday dinners and the one serving of everything and the careful steady eyes. I thought about what a rule costs you when you keep it past the point where it's protecting you and into the point where it's just keeping you away from something true. I thought about my sister's face in that parking garage, without the armor. Finally, I started the car and drove home to the Houston night, and I did not call her, and I did not text her, and I did not say a single word to Mama. Some things belong to the person they happen to. But I will tell you this. The next Sunday, Camille came to dinner. She ate 2 helpings of everything. And when Anita Baker came on through Mama's old speaker on the kitchen counter, Camille closed her eyes for just a second and smiled the way she used to smile when she was a little girl and thought nobody was watching. Mama caught my eye from across the kitchen. I looked back at my plate. Mama said nothing, but she went to the stove and put another piece of cornbread on Camille's plate without asking. And Camille ate that too. What would you rate this story? Drop 0 to 10 in the comments right now. If this story moved you, hit subscribe for more emotional journeys every day. And if it truly touched your heart, consider leaving a super thanks. Your support helps us create more stories like this. Every contribution, big or small, means a world. Ready for the next story? It's even more dramatic than this one. Click now. Thank you for being part of this journey.